Good day, everybody. Welcome back to my series, Dr. Shepard's Teach from the Beach. We're going to cover the somatic symptom disorders in this video, but before we do, as promised, new t-shirt. This one is an example of my, I suppose, hobby, triathlon. So this is our most recent event, a half iron distance, so 70.3 miles, involve a 1.2 mile swim in Carbons Cove Reservoir, a 56-mile bike ride through the Shenandoah Valley and also up to and along the Blue Ridge Parkway, just north of Roanoke. And then we did a 13.1 mile run in the city of Roanoke along the river there. And I've been doing triathlon since 2008. My wife, Nikki, and I were runners from adolescence, running track and cross country. And that's really kind of how our courtship happened. We would, instead of going to the movies, we would go on long runs together. She helped me train for my first marathon. Yeah, it's sort of a unique part of our story. Shortly after we were married, my father had given me one of his old bicycles. So my dad got really into cycling in the late 80s, early 90s when Greg LeMond was winning the Tour de France. This is some of you may not know who Greg LeMond was, but he was sort of the, I suppose, the first great American cyclist. It was followed shortly afterward by Lance Armstrong. Of course, Lance Armstrong has been disgraced, and LeMond, of course, has not been. All I had to say, my dad got really into it when LeMond was winning. Then I got really into it as Lance started taking off, and of course was crushed when it became obvious he was cheating. And so all that to say, my dad gave me an old one of his bicycles right after my wife and I got married, and we bought her a relatively cheap road bike, and really got into cycling around Jackson, Mississippi, racing when I was in my first year of my master's program, as it turns out. And so that's just sort of blossomed into combining three sports that we love, swimming, cycling, and running. And we've kind of been doing it ever since. We've done 3 full Ironman races, which involve 2.4 mile open water swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon, a full marathon, so 26.2 miles after that. It's a pretty long day. I think my fastest time is in the 12-hour range. And then this race here, we haven't done a full Ironman since 2015. Shortly after that, we started our family, having our first child in 2016. And so the time demands of the full Ironman don't mesh well with our lifestyle anymore. So we do the half distance. So that's sort of the promised t-shirt insight into my personality. Has very little to do with somatic symptoms, although we do have some somatic symptoms from time to time, aches and pains, but usually they are not of the pathological variety. Usually they do have some type of medical explanation. So building on that, the somatic symptom disorders have the unifying theme of the prominence of somatic symptoms and or illness, anxiety is associated with significant distress and impairment, but the symptoms do not appear to have a objective medical association. So clients who are presenting with somatic symptoms may come to you complaining of pain, fatigue, or even sort of illness, or worries about illness in themselves, or they may have worries about illness in someone that they're caring for. We'll get into that in a little bit too. But there's no sort of association between the symptoms and a known, recognizable medical physical basis. So as you may or may not know already, soma is a word that refers to the body apart from the mind, psyche, soul. But these conditions are those in which the symptoms are showing up in the soma, showing up in the body, but they are of a mind, psyche, psychological basis, because there is no traceable physical or basis for them. So in this class, we have a number of different disorders. We have somatic symptom disorder, illness anxiety disorder, which was known as hypochondriasis in DSM-4 and previous editions. There's also neurological symptom disorder, which was known as conversion disorder in previous editions of the DSM. There's psychological factors affecting other medical conditions. And then there is factitious disorder and factitious disorder imposed on another. That probably is the most concerning of the disorders within the class. And then, of course, we have other specified and unspecified somatic symptom disorder. So somatic symptom disorder in and of itself is defined as distress about bodily symptoms. For example, localized pain or fatigue. They do not have an associated medical explanation, at least not in the physical body. Clients presenting with this, it's important to note, just having somatic symptoms without a medical explanation is not sufficient for a diagnosis of this disorder. But a client must also meet at least one of 3 course severity criteria. This is criterion B in the DSM. These 3 criteria are a disproportionate and persistent thoughts about the seriousness of one's symptoms, persistently high level of anxiety about health symptoms, and excessive time and energy devoted to these symptoms or health concerns. And of course, this also comes with the distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of function. Next, we have illness anxiety disorder, which is a preoccupation with having or acquiring an illness. The preoccupation is excessive given the circumstances. So a person, for example, may come to you with anxiety and they have a family history of perhaps cancer or hypertension, diabetes. So under those conditions, it might be reasonable for a person to have anxiety about developing these symptoms. But in this case, the anxiety is so severe that it leads to sort of almost a paralysis or a inability to take action, to put into practice health practices that may alleviate the anxiety and reduce the risk of developing these perhaps these conditions that have a contextual basis in reality. All I had to say, again, illness anxiety disorder is preoccupation with having or acquiring an illness, and the preoccupation is excessive given the circumstances. Neurological symptom disorder, which again I said was also known as conversion disorder in previous editions of the DSM, is characterized by symptoms of altered motor or sensory function. without compatibility with a known neurological or medical condition. So a person may be experiencing sort of loss of feeling, loss of sort of their five senses. It's one or more of them: taste, touch, smell, vision, hearing. They may have tremors or maybe even suffer from seizures, but there's no identifiable sort of epilepsy or other medical condition. So that's sort of a neurological symptom disorder. Psychological factors affecting other medical conditions. So in this case, there is sort of a identifiable medical condition, but the psychological element of what I guess of the client's presentation is exacerbating the physical concern. So, for example, you may encounter somebody who has anxiety exacerbating asthma. So, person deals with symptoms of asthma that have a medical sort of explanation, but the anxiety they feel about the asthma may trigger and or worsen asthma attacks. So treatment could be working toward alleviating the anxiety to reduce the severity of the asthma attacks. Perhaps most concerningly, the most concerning condition in this class of disorders arguably is factitious disorder and factitious disorder imposed on another. You'll notice in the DSM that these are sort of grouped together in the diagnostic sort of description, the criteria. You may have heard this condition referred to as Munchausen syndrome and or Munchausen syndrome by proxy in other sort of venues. That's probably how it's most commonly known. Factitious disorder and factitious disorder imposed on another is one of these conditions that is very mysterious because it is very rare, although the prevalence of it is not fully known because of the sort of factors that are part of the disorder that make it difficult to track, because it really is sort of a psychological process where a person is with or without awareness fabricating a mental health or physical health condition for some type of psychological goal or gain, right? When, like I said, the illness is fabricated. So a person may impose this upon themselves, or, and this is the most concerning part, most concerningly, they may impose it on somebody else. So a person who is suffering from Munchausen syndrome, by proxy, I should say, factitious disorder imposed on another, is either creating conditions that lead to some type of mental health or physical health suffering in another person. Usually it is a child or a vulnerable adult. So in some cases, this is sort of just purely psychological, and it's got this sort of sinister quality to it because the vulnerable person or child, like vulnerable adult or child, is dependent upon the person we're going to call our client. And so oftentimes, because of this power differential and imbalance, the person in the one down position has to kind of go along and may be doing this unconsciously without awareness because they assume that sort of their caretaker is, has their best interest in mind. And so, yeah, it has this sort of sinister quality to it. person could be creating sort of just psychological conditions, or they could be doing things as blatant as poisoning the vulnerable person to create the condition. And it is almost always sort of, if it is present, it is almost always sort of a abusive situation where the person who is imposing the condition is in fact abusing their power and abusing the child or vulnerable adult. Again, this is assumed to be incredibly rare, but actual prevalence is unknown because it is sort of a phenomenon that's based in deception. It's very difficult to track. However, 2/3 of known pooled cases have been attributed to women. So it's often the case that it's, and this may be explained by the fact that in our culture in the United States, women are more likely to be put into caregiving roles than their male counterparts. There are many potential explanations for this. That being said, the known prevalence is that it is sort of a 2/3 to 1/3 female to male ratio. It is usually a form of child abuse, like I mentioned before. The perpetrator is the person who gets the diagnosis. However, the one imposed upon, typically a child or vulnerable adult, may be given a diagnosis associated with being an abuse victim, so that they may receive a Z code or a T code, which is something we'll talk about later in the term, and located in the back part of the DSM. So let's do what we can to try to bring this class of disorders to life, like we often do. Share my screen with you here. And we will, before we share the screen, again, if you have not yet read the vignette that I've included with this video, please pause now and go back and read that. And we'll work through Stephanie's case when you come back. So pause. Welcome back. All right, so Stephanie, as you will remember, bear with me here. There we go. Stephanie is a young adult, college-educated cisgender woman who lives with her parents in the home in which she grew up in the northeastern region of the United States. She's an experienced proficient skier. Recently had aspirations of a career as a ski instructor. She's an easygoing, worldly, active, curious, and sociable person. Because her family is of high socioeconomic status, she has access to a number of opportunities and privileges. Despite these assets, she has been unemployed for the past year. She attributes her occupational impairment to debilitating pain in her neck and shoulders that medical providers have had trouble diagnosing. Stephanie is a college graduate, but currently unemployed for reasons stated above. Her father is a respected attorney in their home community, indicating high socioeconomic status. Though her parents have voiced support, there is also a long history of Stephanie's parents responding to her career aspirations in what could be termed as dismissive ways, at least in part because of the way in which her dream of professionalizing her skiing ability compares to the SES of her family and her father's profession. So our presenting problems include chronic pain. Stephanie reported that for the past year, she has experienced chronic and debilitating pain in her neck. This pain has inhibited her from engaging in physical activities at which she not only previously excelled and enjoyed, but also had planned to follow as a career. She has great difficulty shifting her attention from the pain or engaging socially while discussing it. She has been unemployed for the past year for reasons closely associated with the pain. The second presenting problem is the inhibited occupational functioning. As her unemployment has persisted, Stephanie reported that she has begun to experience ambivalence regarding her career future. She reported that she perseverates upon returning to school to further her education or choosing a different career path altogether. She also presents with impaired social functioning. Although she reported that she feels loved and supported by her family, Stephanie also reported that she and her father have a long history of conflict around her career ambitions and meeting her academic and career potential. She reported having chronic and long-standing difficulties communicating her thoughts, feelings, and needs in developmentally appropriate and assertive ways. As far as relevant history goes, the onset of Stephanie's primary concerns, that is, the chronic pain, can be traced to an event that occurred about a year ago, when she experienced her throat constricting and having trouble breathing while traveling across the country to begin a job as a ski instructor. The experience was so severe that after consulting with her parents, she decided to leave her car outside of Chicago and fly home. Since that time, Stephanie's neck pain has been persistent and debilitating. Multiple attempts from her medical professionals in her life to diagnose biological origins of the pain have been unsuccessful. Since her return home, Stephanie has remained unemployed, and her lifestyle has led to other social and physical health concerns, such as avoiding others because of her embarrassment about her pain, as well as a decline in her physical fitness. She no longer engages in outdoor activities, which is a considerable departure from her previous lifestyle and functioning. Stephanie is an easygoing, worldly, active, curious, and sociable young woman. She is intelligent and has done well academically. Stephanie is charismatic, extremely likable, and seems to make friends easily. She has a strong social support system. She used to enjoy being outdoors and engaging in physical activities. Despite her somatic concerns, she enjoys good health and does not, upon initial assessment, have any co-occurring mental disorders. Stephanie's parents are loving and relatively supportive. They have provided with her a place to live, and they meet all her basic needs. She cares about her mother and father and appears to have a solid relationship with them, although her father desires to seek further education to enable her to enter a professional occupation. Family supports her decision to enter counseling. Stephanie lives in a safe and supportive community. She appears to be very social and still has a number of friends in the community. Family's social status also provides her with access to other opportunities and resources in the community. In the past, she was more involved in the local community by teaching young children how to ski. She still possesses the desire to help others in the community and learn to succeed. Medically, Stephanie has no diagnosable physical conditions. No concerns were reported regarding suicide or self-harm risk. No current medication, legal concerns, substance misuse, or historical family health concerns reported. So, to a formal diagnosis, I landed on somatic symptom disorder with predominant pain, with a persistent course, and severe severity. So to this clinician, Stephanie's chronic neck pain in the absence of physical etiology meets criterion A for somatic symptom disorder. She also appears to exhibit disproportionate and persistent thoughts about the seriousness of her symptoms, high anxiety about her health, and time and energy devoted to the symptoms. This is criterion B, and the severity specifier. And the state of being symptomatic has persisted for about the past year, which meets criterion C and the course specifier. Other medical conditions were ruled out by other medical professionals according to the initial interview. Generalized anxiety disorder was ruled out for Stephanie because the main focus of this disorder is not usually somatic symptoms, according to the DSM-5 TR. Delusional disorder was also ruled out because the conviction of her symptoms indicated a serious underlying condition, I should say, do not appear to rise to the level of expected psychosis. Study of the effectiveness of pharmacological interventions is complicated by the high incidence of comorbidity that somatic symptom disorder has with anxiety and depression. And since Stephanie does not present with symptoms that rise to the level of an anxiety or depressive disorder, she is likely a good candidate for a treatment plan that prioritizes psychotherapy without psychopharmacological interventions. Some SSRIs and tricyclic antidepressants have been shown to provide temporary relief in somatic symptoms. However, those with the most severe complaints, perhaps similar to Stephanie, often do not show improvement in response to these medications. So that's sort of the considerations for psychopharmacology, neurological, biological. Looking forward to reading and responding to questions and comments you may have about somatic symptoms in the discussion board. And I'll see you back here next folder about feeding and disorders. Thanks.